Ali evo, budući da smo prešli broj 50, sad nas je 57 u sobi.
Since we have passed the number of 50, we have now 61, 64. The number is increasing, so perhaps we can slowly start. And as the people will join us, that's how we will accept them and include them in the event. Branka, would you say a couple of words in the name of CROSOL before I take over the moderation? Well, I'd just like to thank to all the people that have participated in writing and creating this first report of this kind. And I hope that it will be some sort of a baseline for some sort of reportings in the future and to follow the EESCs in Croatia that we are planning to create. I hope that's going to be an interesting discussion. I would like to mention that when it comes to any comments that are related to this report or any sort of feedback or whatever you would like to tell us, you're free to write us, you're free to contact us. And now I'd like to give the floor to Gordon so he can moderate this discussion. All right, thank you, Branka. Greetings to everyone. My name is Gordon Bosanac and I have a great pleasure to moderate this short discussion. We're going to try to be brief and very concise, but to the point. And the first report that the civil society have done when it comes to the implementation of Agenda for 2030. Before we go to the seminar, I just want to mention a couple of technical issues. First of all, today we're going to have two languages, Croatian and English. And if you're going to look at the lower right part of the screen, there's an icon which says interpretation, and then you can choose the language in which you would like to follow the discussion. We have our interpreter, that's me, and I'm going to interpret on both directions, so you're going to be very, very free to choose the language in which you would like to follow the discussion. And you can also put off interpretation if you understand both languages, so don't have any interference with that. Another technical information, all of you that are participants of this seminar, you can involve in a seminar. I'd like, if you'd like to have any questions or comments or whatever, you can write them down in the comment, and I'll try jointly with Branka and Christian to follow how things are developing in that side. And now we have set the settings in such a way that only the panelists can be able to see each other, and the attendees can follow it. It's maybe a bit limiting, but you know, it facilitates the work of the moderators. And I can see that the Gabriela Vidic that joined us here, she is logged more than once, so maybe she can check if the Zoom account is right or is working properly. Another thing that I wanted to emphasize is related to our panelists. And we have to record this discussion due to the fact that not all people can be present here. And they would like perhaps to follow the discussion. Perhaps it's okay with all of you so that we can record this session. Everything? Lidija, Ms. Mandić, is everyone okay with that? Mr. Lappalainen, you okay with that? With the session being recorded? All right. Then Branka is going to switch on the recording. I believe that's all when it comes to those technical data or information. I'm going to start with a very short introduction. And as I've said, we're going to talk about the perspective of the civil society organizations when it comes to the implementation of the Agenda 2030. I'd like also to thank all of those that have participated in the report, especially to the ones that have coordinated this process, because it's open to various organizations, civil society that are part of the CROSOL network or platform of CROSOL, but also some of the others which have come from outside of this network. And we deal with a very voluminous type of work, a very large scope. We know that the Agenda of 2020 is a very wide agenda that has lots of reaches in its scope. And when we had prepared for this report, there have been a couple of options which involved taking over only a couple of goals so that we don't go as wide with it. But then at the end, we've decided to go very bravely with this adventure. And then we will have a couple of organizations in civil society in order to foster things future. And then I'd like to talk some about methodology, because I know when we have drafted the following methodology, and there are a couple of methodologies, and many members of EU, but also countries from all over the world have developed their own methodologies on how they will be able to follow this global enterprise. And they've decided to go with this options that will get the main goals in place, but not look into the sub goals, and try to emphasize what we have seen as vital, as the key thing for the Republic of Croatia, and perhaps leave on the side those matters that are not so much related to the life in Croatia. In this way, the scope has narrowed down a lot, but then some other indicators have been set up. First of all, we have to ask what has the Republic of Croatia has done in the last 2 years. I think that's the deadline when it comes to legislation. So we're going to put our attention to the legislative processes related to the Croatian government and the parliament, and related to certain goals of the strategy. And you can see an explanation on that in every single chapter, which is related to that. Another indicator that I believe that is very important to take into account is to review the budget of the Republic of Croatia for 2021. So the policies do not remain only on paper, but you can see if there's financial needs that are reserved for them to be implemented based on legislative solutions and other initiatives. Then we can also see in every single chapter, if possible, financial budgeting for that. We will also have some sub-questions which are related to the main chapters that I've already mentioned. And then the fourth subject was to see how much the Republic of Croatia has achieved in each of those goals and cooperated internationally, because we know that the Agenda 2030 is a global issue, and we don't want to remain closed and see what's happening in Croatia, but to understand how international cooperation functions or does not function in every single of those goals. And therefore, in every one of those chapters, we're going to find a short chapter or a review on how Croatia implements or achieves those goals, not only in its own territory, but also globally. And the last part, the last indicator, is to show some sort of example of good practice, especially when it comes to the civil society organizations. That's a very local example, and global actions, street actions, advocated actions, how citizens can actually implement to those matters. And that's not an issue of state institutions, but it's an issue of all of us, all citizens, so that we all of us will start this issue. So that was the sort of methodology. It was very strict in the sense that people had 4 or 5 pages in order to summarize that all, which seems very demanding. And we know how many global subjects there are, but lots of people manage very concisely to the point to bring down their views on how do they see the implementation of the Agenda 2030. Some of the chapters are a bit wider, some of them are a bit more narrow, but I believe that it gives a clear review of the situation in Croatia. But sometimes we have stronger, sometimes weaker capacities, and sometimes some of the capacities for some chapters are more specific. Some of the chapters have been reviewed in more details, and so on and so forth. So we have done this first chapter report, which is a good step for the society, organization, civil society, and then all these objections or observations bring the wish for all of us to go in this process. This all for the introduction on the report itself. So I'd like to emphasize also that today we cannot initiate all 17 chapters. We cannot go into the detailed content of those chapters, but we're going to mainstream our discussion. What does make the reporting on Agenda 2030 important? What does happen in the EU, and how civil society globally managed to follow the implementation of the Agenda 2030? And what's very important to see how the Republic of Croatia institutionally and officially further can continue in reporting and implementing of the criteria related to the agenda. And in order to come to those questions, to those aspects, to those questions, we have some excellent panelists that I'm very happy to be able to say hello to our guests here. First of all, we have Ms. Mirta Mandić from the Ministry of European and Foreign Affairs. She is the head of the Department for Global Issues. That sounds big, very global, but she is the right person to be here with us today, because at the Ministry of Foreign and European Affairs, she has worked in preparing the first report, voluntary report that the Republic of Croatia has drafted and handed over to 2019 when it comes to the Agenda 2030. Alongside that, she is also the head of the working group of the Council of European Union for the development of the Agenda for 2030 during the Croatian presidency, depending that all of those events happen in the context of the project of Croatian presidency that has been prolonged because of COVID and all of the other events. We will have to see what has been done during the presidency of the Republic of Croatia with the EU. And yeah, first of all, hello and welcome, Ms. Mandić. Thank you. Thanks for inviting us. Then we have Lidija, Pavić, Rogošić. And Lidija, for the people in the civil sector, is very well known. She is from ODRAZ, an NGO. And that's one of the first associations that in the Republic of Croatia has been able to follow the global agenda and has dealt with those matters. And we are very happy, Lidija, that you are with us here. So we'd like to welcome you. Thank you very much for having us. And then our third participant is a very dear friend, Rilli Lappalainen from Finland. Rilli is, for the time being, the head of CONCORD. If you don't know, CONCORD is a European network of all national networks that deal with international cooperation. But Rilli also is a good friend of CROSOL. We have also worked on the project of following the Croatian presidency of the EU. And in fact, Rilli was a great support, I have to say, to CROSOL and its first steps and its presentation in the European scene. And then really thank you very much for that and welcome here. And thank you for being here today with us.
Okay.
All right, let's start immediately with discussions. I'm going to ask Lidija to answer a couple of questions. Lidija, what's your perspective? Because you deal with those matters for so many years. Can you do in a very summarized way and briefly what are the development goals and are they important? And do you think they're too ambitiously set? Thank you, Gordon. I'd like to say hello to all of you, and I'm really happy that we have today the opportunity to discuss on this subject that is really important when it comes to the goals of sustainable development. It seems to me that that is a very good path that we have taken through UN, but also it has expanded globally, because in a way we have been able to identify all of the subjects that are important for sustainable development. And what are the obstacles? And we have to mention that this process that has resulted with those goals has lasted for 3 years, and we had lots of consulting processes throughout the regions. Some of those processes happened here in Croatia as well. And so therefore, those are not the goals that were set spontaneously, but they're a result of a very detailed discussion. And its title itself shows that they are global. The global issues have been defined in various dimensions of sustainable development, social, economical, environmental, but we also have those 2 goals that deal with the institutions, with peace, partnership, and some very important processes that somehow have to happen at all possible levels. And therefore, to people, it's easier to recognize that what they do is part of the sustainable development. Before, we would name sustainable development something that is related to environment, while those goals show that that is comprehensive. And in fact, they have shown that all of those goals are intermingled. And especially if you see the targets or the sub-goals, sub-objectives, sometimes it's very hard to determine which of the sub-goals goes into which goal, primary goal. that means that we have to work together. We have to decide and act into the level where we are active to determine which goals are important and in which segment can we act to fulfill them. So I believe that in segment they're not too ambitious. And I believe that at every single level, we have to define the goals that are important to us and in what direction are we going to move and what do we want to achieve at a certain period of time. Then therefore I can say that those are adoptable goals. Before I make the other question, in the chat box you have the link for the report. The report is being intensely translated into English, but all of you that speak Croatian, you can click on it and you can look at the report, while the English version will come along very soon. Thank you, Lidija. I think that this is a very important moment when you spoke about its intermingling. And I believe that in this process, it's very hard to set the methodology because it has to be set in the chapter 7, 8, or 13. In this sense, do you think that's a bit confusing? Do you believe that those reportings and reports that are a result of this process bring some sort of a silence in communication, and maybe everything can be passed through any of the goals? Well, it seems that various areas of action can be reviewed through various lenses. And as we have said before, we have some doubts on where does a certain description of certain goals or actions belong to. But all of this is intermingled. As I've said, some of these actions can be seen through the lens of environmental issues and the others through economical issues and so on. But I think we have to set the value goals. When it comes to the reporting, as you've said yourself, there are various forms of methodology, and the ones that have drafted the methodology have brought down the focus on various aspects of the goals. But what is important to emphasize is that when it comes to those goals, we have to talk loudly, to follow them, to follow their implementation, to see where we've managed to achieve something and where is something that lacks, where are we lacking, and we can have some sort of a common image and bring the focus down for the future periods and determine what we can do together and advocate for partnership and agreements on defining how we can move forward and how we can move towards achieving those goals and bring those indicators that we have set for ourselves. I'd like also to go back to one of the things that you have mentioned, that those goals have kind of generically development. When we work with those sustainable development, it's kind of, we feel that those, it's understood, it's natural. But how much is it important to have this participative global level of discussion? Because now we are referring to the report of Croatia, because even here we can have some difficulties on agreeing on some joint attitudes. But what's the, how is it possible to achieve a global deal among nations so that globally this agenda will be implemented for 2030? And even today, when we have the global relations being deteriorated and some of the countries moving away from each other, do you think that this is a new challenge, and is global agenda for 2030 still implementable or not? No, it's still very important, and it shows the direction which we need to take. Or in a way, it's some sort of a vision that perhaps we might never achieve, but towards which we should aim to go. And we should set even time goals and also indicators that we want to fulfill and the changes we want to achieve. But to me, it's fascinating that through this 3 years long process, we managed at the global level to define the problems and how we can, through those goals, resolve these issues. Because we're going to go back to Millennium Goals that have preceded those goals. They encompassed mainly countries, developing countries. And here it shows that all countries in the world have issues that they need to resolve. starting from the very first one to fight poverty and lack of opportunity for some other people. And even if today the difference between poor and rich is very big, but then it's some sort of recognition globally that we all have issues, the poor and the rich countries, and we all have to resolve them, and we all have to be on board in this. And it was very interesting. I participated in one part of this process, and it was interesting to follow, to participate. And I don't know if you follow this, but in June, the goals seemed different than in September. So intensely, always we worked on agreements, on setting agreements, and it was a good process from which we can learn ourselves to do it at national level, to do at local level, to do jointly in civil sector. And I believe that that's something that we are doing already. And because today it's very hard, you can find one single project that one organization does. All of us, we work jointly in drafting and developing projects, and this is something that has been proven to be very valuable. All right, thank you very much, Lidija, for the time being. I'd like to go on. I'd like to give the floor to Ms. Mandić from the Ministry of Foreign and European Affairs. As I've said, here are two important roles that Ms. Mandić does, that she had it with the working group during the presidency and in relation to Agenda 2030. And she also participated in drafting the first official report on the Agenda 2030. Ms. Mandić, maybe you can share some of your experiences on this, and on one and also the other roles that you have as part of this, of your functions. Thank you very much. Indeed, I'd be very happy, and I'm really glad that I'm part of this panel today. And I'd like to relate to two issues that have been emphasized here at the introduction. Mr. Bosanac said that I come from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and he said that I had the Global Issues Department, and he mentioned the fact that the Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals is a project that Lidija has defined further and has been initially adopted at UN level, and that's where the role of the development of the global development issues comes in. And when we have been making decisions on this panel discussion, I mentioned that it is key to understand what is the role of Ministry of Foreign Affairs. When the invitation followed, the invitation was first of all addressed to the Department for Economical Issues, which deals with those so-called foreign segments of the goals for sustainable development. What are those foreign segments? That's the famous goal 17. That's the famous cooperation, the part related to partnership. But what's the key thing? It's key to understand that the Department for Global Issues does not deal with implementation of the goals at national level in the way that it participates in suggesting measures, on setting measures, deciding indicators for certain measures. It's in opposite to that, exactly due to the fact that the goals for sustainable development are set, if I may say so. And as a lawyer, I'll try to not use always a legal dictionary. It's at the global issues or global affairs department tells a lot about the segment that Lidija mentioned. So all of the goals of sustainable development and the first 16 goals of sustainable development are not only the national segments, it's a vice versa process that goes in both directions. And that's why the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and of the global Department of Global Matters is important. We are the ones that transmit global messages, and that we come to the EU policies respectively, which are implemented by the respective responsible institutions, which go and follow the certain goals and a group of sub-goals. So this sort of a common synergy is the indicator that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs works in promoting the implementation of the goals of sustainable development. and in the group at the global level, but also further down to the national level. And here we tackle also the objection that Mr. Bosanac mentioned when he asked Lidija if she thinks that the goals are realistic, and if today at those global types of challenges that we are witnesses to, in a way, are decomposed, defragmented. But from my point of view, I would say that this service does not deal only with the goals of sustainable development, but my entire career was mainstreamed on the goals of sustainable development. And why is that so? It's because in all of the segments of society, and we, as Croatian, when we advocate for multilateralism, we advocate for promotions of sustainable development goals. When we are participants of world forums, Lidija mentioned negotiations in this matter. Croatia was very active when it came to negotiating and setting global development goals at the level of organizations, civil societies, at the level of various levels and various segments. And now when we are facing a global crisis caused by COVID-19, and here Lidija mentioned the Golden 16, which refers to security matters, and those security matters now are related more so with climate changes, with migrations, and so on and so forth. So the goals are in those spores of our societies. And when we come to the determination of Croatia and multilateralism, we talk about the determination of Croatia and its dedication to fighting for global goals, to fighting terrorism, to tackling the issues of illegal migration and all the others. In this matter, I would say that my call to Mr. Bosanac yesterday and asking him to present us as one that have headed the working group of the Agenda 2030 during the time of our presidency is because I wanted to tackle during my presentation exactly those matters, but also to emphasize what is also in the title in your report, which I value a lot. And I have to say that I hope that we all agree with this, because I'm very happy to welcome the report of Mr. Lappalainen, who has headed CONCORD, who heads CONCORD, and that is the fact that we have this low political orientation towards the Agenda 2030. I think that I know what we are saying without having to overemphasize this. So I can proudly also say that the situation was exactly the opposite of that. I have myself invested a lot in this, and I have to go back to the very beginning. The program, which involves the goals of sustainable development, that the priority of the Croatian presidency. When you read them initially, it becomes clear that the sustainable development goals are involved or set as priority. There are a couple of pages when we have mentioned expressis predis, or the Croatian determination for implementation of the Agenda 2030. And the Prime Minister, during the presidency and at the time of the presentation of our priorities, says, I quote literally, that the promotion of those programs for the United Nations for Sustainable Development in coordination with the European consensus for development is going to be part of the focus of the presidency of Croatia. And I am very sorry that this sentence came in, but perspectives can change. My perspective is that the heading with the working group of the Agenda 2030 that followed should come immediately after the political directions of European Commission would have been approved. And this was a result of the continuous non-stop discussions with my colleagues. And I can also remember some of the phases of those discussions and how the days looked like. We have to be so detailed and I have to be very direct when it comes to this. And then We also have included the European Green Plan. That was the 11th of December 2020. Sorry, 2000. And I think that's where the document was initially drafted. But they became all part of the mainstream European policy. And there is also one part which was very famous and kind of became part of my interest, but also I have involved it in my entire report. And I will also have to emphasize the fact that says that this was a trigger and that the situation that follows will help to bring those goals into the focus of national policies. Well, I want to say that in the focus of our national policies, we have to bring the EU decisions. We cannot have to forget this. The whole government and the whole society approach is something that we all advocate for. So again, I greet this report wholeheartedly, but Croatia is not at this moment some entity that was outside of this planet altogether. So I simply cannot imagine the situation as such. And we have expected day after day programs from the European Commission and then we've had discussions with the colleagues of the European Commission that themselves did not know how well the European Commission involved those goals of sustainable development, and let alone not to have them among our priorities. Back then we had the new commission, so they're waiting for that. Yes, that's true. You can see it's very important that after the political directions that we have set on, we would know how much European Commission can involve the goals for sustainable development. The European Green Plan has brought some sort of a formulation, and I would say that I found out about it just a night before it's been published. Why do I say this in such a dramatic way? I say it so because I can say in what level was Croatia involved. I can again say as a professional, and no, I'm not talking as the representative of the state administration, because I've been here. That's my career for 20 years. I worked here for 20 years. But first of all, I have to say that I'm a professional interested in this matter, and for me, it was impossible to think that we're going to remain on the side and then somebody follows and somebody misses something out. For instance, we spoke with the colleagues from the Finnish presidency, from the Romanian presidency. We don't have to forget the reflection paper preceded to this, which gave 3 opportunities for the goals of sustainable development. And with lots of attention, we welcomed the directions of the new approach of European Commission. And then when there was still no corona, back then, I can proudly remember the days of presidency with the working group, and the thing that I feel sorry for is the corona and the earthquake in Zagreb. But otherwise, I can proudly remember the agenda of the working group that I was heading, and proudly I can say that my colleague who assisted me and dealt with sustainable assistance, developing assistance. And that was a very good interaction and synergy. And our agenda involved, and I will very soon come to those indicators that are measurable and give us the indicators that we need to have for further steps. And that involved the discussion at the Green Plan and the European Commission goals, which was at the heart of the European policies, but it allowed open the discussions if we're talking about all goals, and we have at the end of the day to have the social development pillar to be looked in a special way. We had the Team Europe program and so on. So I would say that this is an issue on which I can probably talk for 2 hours. We're not going to have that much time, but this shows how much we can communicate with one another, because I believe that this sentence is a result of something that very soon can be developed, regardless how it sounds like. I can go back just for a second. We have to keep an eye on time, but I would just have another important question. to clarify this sentence, which has tackled the discussion, which is excellent because you yourself say that we come from various perspectives. And his has been closed baseline on the report that I've been looked very details by Ministry of European Foreign European Affairs, Mr. Aradman, that I think that civil sector and GONG and GONG is an organization that have done an independent evaluation of the President of the Republic of Croatia, and CROSOL, which very carefully followed this presidency and was very active during the presidency, perhaps managed to detect some of the media actions, whereas the work on this kind of working groups remained undetected. And it seemed as some of the right steps haven't been made. So perhaps, yes, excellent. This hard work that was, so it was not mainstream, so it was not something that remained only on paper. On contrary, I also have the confirmations, and the German presidency has taken the methodology of work of European presidency, especially when it comes to presiding with the Agenda 2030, and what is the focus. And what we have to take in mind when we talk about reporting, then at the very beginning of our presidency, and welcoming all of those documents. At the end of the day, the Green Plan has foreseen a range of documents which we, during our presidency, have followed to understand how those goals will be involved. And it was very key component that three council conclusions, which presented the baseline of the work of this working group, managed to take into account the overall implementable strategies, so the comprehensive implementation strategy. And that was the key thing. The European Commission on Green Plan gives clear indications that it's going to deliver them into sectors, into chapters. And through that, the Croatian presidency advocates, in fact, for a equal attention to be given to the European semester and the joint concept of the European semester. So those were the discussions that we had on our agenda. Further on, when we're talking about the indicators, we had a very well prepared meeting, which we had to do with the working group that involves the goal 16. This is the aspect of involving social dimension. That means the bringing in of disaggregated data, this data that is being scattered around, and as Lidija mentioned rightfully, has enabled us to base our sustainable development on environment and economical issues. But now we have to bring on the social components. The social components that sometimes are very difficult to measure in terms of the impact, of the efficiency, of the contribution that can be measured. And the goal of our president has been disrupted by our by Corona, but we continue through video conferences. What Croatia brought in, that is the methodology of correspondence. When the meetings have been postponed, we managed to continue our discussions based on some guidelines, based on some subjects that were related to the legislative acts and strategies that have been followed in the EU. So I believe that we can follow our reports through various methodologies that are going to be shown through the development of BNR, if I heard correctly, but there are indicators. There are UN indicators, there are Eurostat indicators, there are the initial reports of Eurostat that involve Chapter 18, and especially the European semester that in the following cycle will be related to the goals of sustainable development. So for now, for sure, there are elements on reporting, and I believe that here we have a new chapter and where we participate wholeheartedly. And of course, we will also, I don't want to take more time from the colleagues that are part of this discussion. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the explanation. I think that is a chance for CROSOL to continue the dialogue with Ministry of Foreign Affairs, so that we don't meet only once when the goals are defined, but also when it comes to setting the goals for the reports. And the time is ticking away, and I see the discussion is very active in the chat box as well. So people have questions, so we have to go back to our participants. But anyhow, first of all, I'll give the floor to Rilli before we go there. A lot has been said on what happens in the EU level. Rilli, as the head of CONCORD, follows from the first lines what's happening at the European Union level. Rilli, please, can you tell us through your presentation what happens in the EU and how the civil society in the EU is coping with the implementation, and what has COVID killed the Agenda 2030? Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Gordon, and thank you very much for the invitation. It's really a pleasure to be back Croatia somehow, at least in mentally, and thanks a lot for all the cooperation what we have done during the years. So it's been really a pleasure to work with you, and I'm really happy to hear about this progress what has been made on that. I really remember the first discussions what we had with Branka and Gordon about that, how to really get the Agenda 2030 in Croatian agenda, and I really see a lot of progress. So congratulations for all of you, of course, from the government side as well, but also in the civil society. So well done so far, and this is just the first step. So I think that there's quite a lot of work to be done as well, like all of us. So I'm trying to just open a little bit, and I think that it's really hopefully compliant as well about that what we just heard from the ministry point of view, where the EU goes on at the moment. So I'm currently the president of CONCORD, and of course being heavily involved on the EU level work for a very long time ago. But I think that we are really now in an interesting situation, we as a CONCORD and all the other civil society colleagues as well, that there is the progress going on in the EU, but perhaps our biggest worry really is that we need to definitely speed up. Exactly the changes in the environment are so quickly going on, and not necessarily in the positive side. And that's why I think that we need to definitely collectively speed up quite a lot on the work what we're doing. I hope that you see my slides very well. Okay, that's good. So just as some kind of image for you that exactly this current commission is doing pretty well. And like you can see, it really reflects quite a lot about the priorities of the current commission, reflects quite a lot on all the 17 development goals. And I'm not really going in the details, but here you can see the list of those priority areas. And at least in theory, you can really mirror that every single priority areas what the Commission is operating has the relationship with the Agenda 2030 and its goals on there. While I'm seeing that in theory, it's seen, or perhaps one of our worrying points really is that we haven't really seen the progress yet. And we know all the circumstances. We know that COVID came and it was really slowing about the whole processes. And then we do hope that exactly in the current month and maximum in 1 year, we can really definitely see much more about the progress. But thinking about the priorities for the EU, it really covers very nicely about all the pillars or the aspects of the sustainability, includes about the environmental, social, and the economical side. I would love to add about the cultural aspects as well on that, because it is exactly, that is the glue that how we are going to implement Agenda 2030. So in that way, it's necessary to take that aspect on board as well. Another very important principle, which was already mentioned, is this whole government approach, which really means about that we are really seeing everything in the same package, so that we are not just concentrating in a couple of the SDGs as a one silo. There's a lot of progress what is needed to be happen under all of those goals and the targets under those, But what we can really get better results is that we are really seeing all the work in the bigger perspective, having this whole government approach, really having the interlinkages at the same time on mind, whatever the decisions are. And here you can see about the 8 special parts of this, or the components of this whole of the government approach. And I think that if we are thinking about especially about the left side, it really means that we need to have this attitude of the transformation. So the business as usual, what we used to do, it's not anymore working. We need to really think about that the change is needed. We can't really repeating anymore about the things what we used to do in the past, but we need to have this holistic point of view. Another point is linked to that engagement with the other actors in the societies, because that is part of the whole philosophy of the Agenda 2030, where exactly one of the 5 Ps when we're talking about the people, prosperity, planet, peace, and partnerships, it really reflects on that we need to cooperate much more together with the different actors. It's not the business just alone about the governments or not alone about the civil society, but we need to definitely find the ways how we can really combine the work what we are doing. And that is perhaps from our point of view, one of the weak links at the moment in the EU work so far. Then the monitoring and reporting, we just heard about quite a lot on that. Definitely, it's very important to have the indicators, how we are monitoring about the progress. But I'm a little bit worried on that could be turned on that direction, that we are just monitoring and we are not really seeing about the more holistic point of view. Because the problem with the indicators is that they are exactly encouraging to going on the silos and then just indicating what is the progress in every single goal. But what we definitely need much more, and this is the point from the global levels as well, that we need to have a little bit more, some kind of holistic tools, how we're monitoring about the larger impact, what we are trying to build together. Of course, like mentioned earlier as well, that Europe or every all single member states is not alone. We definitely need to have this global and local aspect at the same time. So this is fundamentally important to really having this global aspect in every single regional or national policies as well. And we are not yet there. I think that none of the member states are not yet there, nor the EU, where the EU is definitely much more complex animal on that way. So definitely is the point what we need to think about that. On the right side, you can see exactly one of, or let's say the priority tools, like the European semester, like the financial framework, how we're using the EU's financial resources, better regulation, and also the policy coherence for sustainable development, which is a super difficult topic. And unfortunately, it's not yet prioritized heavily in the context of the EU. The good point is that exactly currently all the EU commissioners, they have one element of their portfolios covers Agenda 2030 as well, especially about their portfolios, what they are doing. But then there's not really the proper mechanism at the moment how to report collectively, how to really make sure that the coherence, like the whole governance approach, is really going to be happen. Of course, the president of the commission is in charge on that, but what we are looking for as a civil society is much more systematic approach to that. That it's really openly told us as well that how it's going to be happen. Perhaps so one example is that there are, like many of the EU member states, has a different kind of mechanism. So far, it has been reported back to the UN voluntarily, like the voluntary national review. This is just for the second, as an example, what we did in last year in Finland, where the Finland reported second time about the national progress to UN. And one element was that inside in the official report, there were the analysis of each of those 17 goals. And there are 2 pages as an example. On the left side, the page is written by the government, and exactly the second page on the right side is the assessment from the civil society side. And that was really, really good example about that how exactly the 2 perspectives from the government side and from civil society side could be exactly combined and giving more update on the current situation, how the, for example, the SDG number 1 has been analyzed and what has been the progress in the last 4 years in the national level on that. So this has been quite exciting exercise, and I'm really happy to tell you more about that later. Then the COVID. I think that we can't really avoid about these circumstances where we are, and the graphics on the left side tells quite a lot. That is the picture from the Human Development Index, and like you see that there has been, it's the positive, the progress, not linear, going really in the speedily up on there. But what happened when the corona came? You can see this red bar on there, which is really going very quickly down, and that tells exactly that many researchers has mentioned that in this 1 year we had went back 20 years on the development globally. And that really tells quite a shocking stories that we definitely need to really speed up. And thinking about the reality where the COVID is definitely influencing every single SDG and its targets, we definitely need to have this much more holistic point of view of how we are going to solve the challenges what we are having on that. And we are still living in the situation where nobody doesn't really know about the final impact of the COVID for the SDGs. We can't just guess what it might be, but I think that this is really the strong message that we need to really be much more clever on exactly using the resources what we are having to really take account about these changes in the environment, and then finding out about the some kind of tools how we can really progress much more. And perhaps just to conclude, is that what we are doing as a civil society, and we are definitely very much rely on the member states on that, and it's great that now during the Portuguese presidency, there's a process at the moment to make the new council conclusions to speed up also and really challenge the commission as well, and hopefully getting more and more encouragement for the commission to speed up about those plans what they have just settled down. But what we definitely need to support from the member states, and we need to support from the European Parliament and all the other actors to really speed up and then put the ambitious level a little bit higher. We are not very happy about the draft version of the council conclusions at the moment. It could be much more ambitious because exactly the clock is ticking, and we definitely need to speed up. I think that we don't have afford anymore to wait any single second on the progress. The second point is really that we will need to work together, because this is really everybody's business. And I think that it's super important that what you mentioned, for example, in your national report, is that what happens in the local level, it really resonates. And so we don't have afford for miss anyone to contributing and taking account about the Agenda 2030 and the sustainability in their every work. So it's super important one. Of course, we hope that during this HLPF, which is coming again, which is the annual report format in the UN, the high-level political forum in July, we are still waiting for that EU is really giving the comprehensive report in the UN level. It has been some kind of tries, but it's not really the comprehensive review. And I do hope that thanks for about this plan, what the Commission is now running, that could be the place where the collective reporting could be happen, hopefully, for example, on the next year in the HLPF. Practically, CONCORD is doing at the moment an analysis on the progress of the policy coherence. We are having a couple of member states as a case studies as well, but we are trying to look at what could be our contribution to helping the Commission to take the policy coherence even more seriously as a part of their businesses, what they do. FINGO is exactly doing at the moment advocacy strategy a little bit for the longer term perspective, that how could we speed up the EU institutions even be doing the better progress on the work, and that is going to be coming out during the spring, and this is definitely the tool for us collectively as a civil society in Europe. And then also in the in the frame of, or in the network called SDG Watch Europe, we also brings together the different thematic NGOs, because CONCORD is working for, is for the development organizations, but we definitely want to cooperate as well about the social NGOs, environmental NGOs, human rights NGOs, etc., so that we can really join the forces with the civil society to boost more, of course, reflecting how we are working as a civil society, but definitely then inspiring and challenging the EU institutions to make the more progress as well. Because I do believe that it's great that there are the progresses happening inside in the institutions, but there's really a lot of work that we need to get all the citizens on board as well. And I think that this is the task for all of us, where we really need about the stories. What are the good local examples where the people are very motivated and can find their ways how to really contribute to the sustainability. And I think that we need to have those human stories, because that resonates. Either you are the politician or whoever on there. I think that we need to have the good examples, and that's why I believe that exactly that kind of work what you have done now in the Croatia and many other places as well, where we can really collect the evidences, we can collect the stories, we can really showcase that this is not really the rocket science, but it's just between our ears, how we can use our capacities and finding the ways that how could we behave better in this planet, and really trying to find the solutions, how to move on. But I think I will stop here and happy to hear the comments and questions as well. Thank you very much.
Hvala Rilli puno na ovoj europskoj perspektivi.
Thank you, Rilli, for this European perspective when it comes to the implementation of Agenda 2030. And here we go back again. And now we come back to 11 o'clock. And of course, I think we can go through 10 to 15 minutes to get on board the questions of the people that we have involved here. And that's me just emphasizing immediately here what Rilli have said, and that is the need to bring on down the warm human stories, to understand the need and what is the Agenda 2030. And maybe that's also an answer to Petra Davidovic. She said, these are great, that the strategies are wonderful, but how are we going to bring down to the citizens, and also the ones that are in key decisions can visualize them, can feel them? I think that it's up to those people to tell the story. Whatever the politics do, the politics will have to be forced to be easier understood on these matters. Ms. Mandić, please go ahead. Please turn on the mic because we cannot hear you. Well, namely, this is a very good question. It's an excellent one. And that is something that all of us intrigues in a way or another. That's how I have to say that. I personally believe that we have the feeling that this is the core of this panel, and we should not move away from this core. And we cannot say that the strategy is this one and how we can visualize this and whatever. Yes, of course, strategies will be endorsed. We go into the national recovery plans right now. Mr. Lappalainen mentioned SDG Watch Europe, and their thinking also goes towards the goals that will have to be involved in the strategies. And this is an entire mechanism that is brought back up to all the levels, national, EU, global. But when we say, how are we going to visualize those matters to the citizens, one of the first meetings on which I was invited were the associations of international libraries, and the colleagues from this library network invited me as the representative of Ministry of Foreign Affairs. What was very interesting, it was interesting that the libraries, regardless of the city we're talking about, they developed bookmarkers with the children to determine the goals of the strategy. I cannot think of any bad example that it was completely curved into my memory. And when we worked in those goals. I can remember a range of examples when we collected the case studies of the civil society organizations. And even today, I think of Terra Habum as my favorite action, but those were all human moments, and we are all invited there. What is this important? Those are not divided things. We all do a part of our work. Those are normal things. And what my colleague, Mr. Bosanec, said, when it comes to the societies of civil organization, it's basically a role for all of us. Are we going to take a badge of civil organizations, or are we going to organize a panel, or make a TV show, or develop a public information campaign, or whatever? This is all something that contributes to this, to the citizens, to teach them how to diversify the ways, how to separate the ways. And all of this contributes to the goals of sustainable development. And then later we can think about monitoring, measurements, indicators, and everything else. Clear. We have in the chat colleagues Blaženka and Zvonka, which shared the analysis of the Croatian presidency, and I would ask you to read this GONG's analysis and also the official report of Ministry of Foreign and European Affairs, because also Rilli said how we can bring the government perspective and also the perspective of civil society. And I think it's very good to get some sort of an image and feeling on the presidency and how successful we were in this presidency. So I just like to bring your attention to this link. There are a couple of questions also in the Q&A. One is related to the indicators. There is a problem or a critique that the indicators do not show progress on SDGs. And how can we do that? How can we follow the how does the private, social, and government sector follow the implementation? Maybe Lidija can say something about this. I can see also that Tomislav has raised his hand. Maybe we can bring and also the people who are the attendees on. So Lidija, indicators, what do they show? Yes, indicators in fact will have to be defined for every single country and for every single local community individually. At the level, national level, we have the Statistical Institute, the State Statistical Office, which have defined some indicators. What I can bring the attention to, it's what Rilli has mentioned, is the coherency between various policies. Due to the fact we can say we can have some sort of a national strategy. And they can go in the same way, and they can be complementary, and they cannot head to various goals, which can happen for us. So those indicators will have to be realistic when it comes to the issues that we do, to what we can, and they can also be related to the budgets. And I like that in this sense we have managed to connect, to relate to this as much as possible, because in fact, by reading those indicators, I sometimes manage to relate intensely, and it seems that you read a phone book in a way, but you can see the real direction of a certain community and the determination to resolve certain problems and for the budget. And we have certain indicators. We can, and I hope that when it comes to following the development of civil society, it's a good example how we can do this. As far as I know, when it comes to sustainable development, once we've had two ways of reporting when it comes to sustainable development in Johannesburg in 2002, 10 years after Rio, when according to a template that UN had prepared, we had in fact worked into, I cannot say a report from the shade, but and view from civil society in developing various aspects of sustainable development. Back then, the organization ODRAZ has worked on this, and I believe this is good to look into this year and to see how far have we gone and how much some of those recommendations are still valid. So we have to go back to this to see where we stand now and how we can develop this entire approach. When it comes to the business sector, there are organizations such as the Croatian Business Association that has a certain number of activities and cooperation with the business sector. So we have the DOP index as well, and there are various activities and which can bring to some sort of common conclusion to what direction are we moving on. And the part on which Rilli referred to, talked about Finland, I think is very important because it's important to involve the points of view of the business community, and I believe that it gives a real image. Thank you very much, Lidija. We have Tomislav Prgic has raised his hand up. And if Tomislav wants to have a question, Tomislav, welcome. Thank you very much for this. I am following your meeting, and I'll say well done, first of all, for Lidija Pavić Rogošić. She has a very beautiful board behind her back, and I believe that you read my comment that I've sent in the chat box. When it comes to the guidelines of sustainable development, are beautiful programs. But what I wanted to emphasize is related to this, and it is the following thing. Why is Slavonia, as a region of Croatia, losing its people? It's because the heads of this self-government units would rather create some sort of a social peace and maintain the existing infrastructure rather than build some new technological structures. Why is that so? Because that's cheaper. It's cheaper to have projects that we are based on, and we can also somehow, we can say, buy people, and rather than make and fulfill this full technological productive process in a small town in whatever. And that's the reason. So if you develop this process, you could have a positive approach. And now we can do with those things. And our mayors and we have to go to work in line with those policies. The strategies that are implemented are the part of the social type. They are beautiful. Indeed, I would like to see them to be implemented, to see our sustainable development indicators in the Croatian countryside. The Croatian countryside would flourish as such. But I believe that to some people this is not even in their interests. I believe that they want to show the kindergarten that is reconstructed, some roads that's been built, rather than open some sort of mini compounds to clean wastewaters or anything similar in a certain town. Yeah, so the rural policies and the heads of the rural policies, especially in small places and communities, are bad. Before the elections, they're going to promise you a lot just to be elected. And after those elections, you, with this status, exactly those municipalities would not have the chance to publicly speak about those issues. Thank you so much, Tomislav. This was concrete. Can you tell us where do you come from? I am an engineer of agronomy, and I deal with rural development, and I come from a small place in Slavonia. Welcome here. So that's in eastern part of Slavonia. In Eastern Croatia, it's a very underdeveloped area, really, so you can understand where it's located. You've heard of what happens there directly from the field. Thanks a lot, Tomislav. Lydia wanted to intervene here, yes. Really, I couldn't hear Tomislav at the perfect sound, so I'm sorry if things were not straightforward. This is a remark from the interpreter. Lydia is saying, yes, I've been following the rural development and everything that happened in this area, and we have established the first action group in Croatia back in 2008, and this was in line with the European initiative called LEADER that in fact very well has caused and resulted with successes in rural development. So we come to the moment which says that the politicians will have to be educated and make more aware or increase awareness among them. So we can do the best we can, so we can go with some sort of a positive approach to them. But often, further from putting down some asphalt on the road, they have no idea what to do. So in general, we should involve the local politicians so that jointly with the other sectors participate in some educations, and we can have those programs of increasing awareness. You can see also good examples, because in Croatia today we have good examples of sustainable development in the local communities. Thanks a lot, Lydia. I would have to add that in a month time we have the local elections, so the citizens will have the opportunity to say what they think and to change what they were not happy with. No, it's 11:13. I think we have overpassed the time for about 15 minutes. I will have to perhaps end this discussion, even if we have some comments and so on and so forth, but I have to do that. I'm really happy to be able to open this discussion. Branka, you've raised your hand, you wanted to say something. I just wanted to add before we close down the discussion that we were working in the English version of this discussion, of this report, and we had a lot of materials and a huge quantity, and although we hope that we're gonna be able to finish that ahead of this time, but you know, we had issues with that. So for all of the people that do not speak Croatian, that's an opportunity to follow that. Thanks a lot, Branka, for this. I'd like to close this discussion down, perhaps in the COVID context, which we have tackled this matter. I forgot to say that in the report we haven't asked just by chance what's going to happen with COVID, but the people, when they felt this, they wrote in the report how the COVID has interfered with them. So I believe that you can find that in the report as well. But this entire crisis related to the pandemics will definitely shake the Agenda 2030, and we can already see that in a way people feel that it is unjust how the vaccines are distributed, not only inside of the EU, which is one of the most developed parts of the world, but also in the other parts of the world. So there are lots of challenges ahead of us, but we're going to continue to work together. And I hope that soon we are going to live through the end of this pandemics, and not in Europe, but also other parts of Europe, all over the world. And lots of people are working that out. They try a lot, from very minor actions to global policies, so that the Agenda 2030 will be implemented. I'm going to close down here. I'd like to thank Bashkim, that I hope managed to interpret, and that we didn't speak too fast. Really, what do you feel about that? Yeah, so, okay, then we did some work here. Thanks a lot, really, for following my boring voice, and hope to see you again.